This is Sean O'Brien here with Auzmor, and welcome to our video podcast, Culture Couch. Our guest here today, super excited. I've been waiting for this for about, a week or two here, the second I heard you were on the docket, Mr. Kyle Horn. So he is the founder and director of America's Job Honor Awards, keynote speaker, and advocate for the nation's untapped workforce, a new kind of hero, right?
That's right. That about sums it up.
Right. Hey, great to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sean. I appreciate it.
So when I first heard the America's Untapped Workforce, I was like, okay, this should be good. And then I went to your website there. Wow, there's a lot of touching videos and stuff like that. We'll actually show you a couple here today. But Kyle, if you could just quick explain a little bit about America's Job Honor Awards.
Certainly.
And what you do there and
Absolutely.
how it came about.
Oh,
right?
you bet. You bet. Yes, had you asked me, Sean, 7 years ago whether I would ever be in charge of a nonprofit organization, I'd have probably laughed in your face. This was something that I did not know was in the cards for me in my life. But what led to it was I was working in the staffing and recruiting agency.
Okay.
And in that position, it really opened my eyes to the realities of our workforce. You know, I had always known theoretically that there were people out there struggling with employment barriers, ranging from past convictions to disabilities. But to be honest with you, I had no idea the sheer numbers. Well, that quickly became evident to me because a lot of the struggling job seekers coming into our doors had those barriers to employment. Now, the irony was, at the same time, employers across the state were hand-wringing about their inability to find motivated talent. So they're saying, send us people, send us people. Well, overrepresented among the people that we had were individuals with these red flags, with these barriers in their background. And yet when we tried to pitch those candidates to the employers, very often the employer would close the door on them. They'd say they're not interested. And that usually arose from the fact that they had policies, often unwritten, that precluded them from considering people with prior criminal convictions.
Right.
So on the one hand, they're screaming for help. On the other hand, not that help.
Right.
And of course, I found that terribly frustrating. And I know that not everyone who has been through the prison system has changed. In fact, I'm inclined to think that far fewer than half have. So I'm not saying hire everybody, but you know when you're talking to an individual and their life is on a new trajectory.
Right.
And why wouldn't we give those people a chance? And yet I was continually frustrated by the employer's reluctance to do precisely that.
Yeah.
So increasingly, I would go home at night haunted by all the great candidates we had met whom we couldn't help because nobody wanted to meet them. And it weighed on me that employer negative bias was one of the greatest stumbling blocks to getting these Americans into the workforce. And so I began puzzling over how can we overcome that negative employer bias. Well, one weekend I had the idea for America's Job Honor Awards. And the idea was we would capture stories of individuals who had successfully overcome their barriers and gone on to make terrific contributions on the job. And so at any rate, I embarked on a one-man campaign to create the website, draw out the business plan, and raise money for videos. I'd never shot a video in my life. And, and I knew that I wanted to present these awards in front of the people who hold the keys to the jobs, the employer community. So managed to sweet talk my way onto the stage of the state's flagship business association.
That's right.
And miracle of miracles, got on that stage. So in 2014, we launched the inaugural Job Honor Awards in Iowa. And basically the crowd's reception exceeded my wildest dreams. It was painfully evident this was the right thing at the right time. The crowd gave 4 extended standing ovations to our 4 honorees. Very emotional, tears in the eyes, and I knew we were onto something. So since that time, I've quit my day job and become full-time director of America's Job Honor Awards. We're now a multi-state movement with national recognition, and we're kind of looking to make that next big step up because we're needed in all 50 states.
Yeah, absolutely. And it started as Iowa's Job Honor Awards, right?
It did indeed.
So that's growing like wildfire. Shoot, we're already at nations here just a couple years later, right?
Yeah, it hasn't taken long.
Yeah, and these stories are just absolutely incredible. It's hard to kind of fight back the happy tears almost, taking a look at some of these. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So fortunately, you brought some of those videos with you today. So we're going to take a quick moment to show the first video here, Mr. David Brand of Madison, Wisconsin.
Excellent.
Lucille is a beer bar, craft cocktail bar, pizza place, taco joint. We really tried to develop this space into something that really appeals to everybody. Especially in the restaurant industry in Madison, we're definitely going through quite a big boom right now. And so there's been a hiring shortage in restaurants, at least during the busy months, for a few years now.
We have a really low unemployment rate, and employers are always looking for dependable, reliable, quality employees to come join their team, and that is who we support in our supported employment program.
Restaurants in particular just have a very high turnover in general, so it's not always hard to find people so much as it's hard to find people that you feel like you're going to train and they're going to stick around for a really long time. We brought David in, and within a week he was just killing it, and everybody loved him, and he's been here ever since.
He is initially pretty reserved. He wants so much to be just one of the guys, and that is, I mean, he's a young guy. Who doesn't want that?
Well, the first day I started loving it more and more. Because first day I saw it, I didn't know it was a restaurant.
Fair enough.
It was very different when we first worked with him, and it was hard. Eye contact was hard, communication was hard, and he's just happier. He's just flourished. Once you get to know David, he'll crack jokes, he'll tease you.
Remember when we tried to give you a knife and we were trying to get you to chop up a bunch of onions?
And I said no, because I don't like onions that much. They hurt my eyes.
And so we just kind of like felt it out and found his comfort level, and then as soon as we found it, he's been doing great ever since. And that was the thing, was I was afraid that I was going to have to add a lot of supervision. When Goodwill first came in, he had somebody with him every day, dedicated, not for very long. And now he doesn't have any supervision at all.
We really make it easy. We are there to help with the initial onboarding and training, so it's not taking away from an already heavy workload that an employer is working with, and it's no cost to the employers. The folks that we support are employed directly by the business that they work in, and we're funded through our retail stores. Our average job retention for the adults that we support is almost 9 years, which is way higher than the rest of the state and country.
If he wasn't growing at all at this, I feel like we would have just failed, because then we're just providing a space in a factory job. But I've also watched him graduate from doing things like getting dropped off by a special bus or a taxi cab every day to riding the bus, like public transportation to and from work every day, and managing his own schedule. And that really felt good.
Oh, my mom and dad are so proud of me. They love it. I enjoy buying gifts for my family. I love doing it. I've been doing it for the last 10 years, and I love doing it still.
He always thinks of his family. His mother just had a birthday recently, and he wanted to make sure he got her a card, and he goes, oh, she just loves chocolate, so I'm gonna get her some chocolate.
We've really, really watched him come out of his shell a ton, which is great because he's a really good communicator. He just doesn't always want to do it.
He has autism, yeah, and some other communicative disorders, but he has figured out how to operate in a really great way at work and live the life he wants.
Work can build character in a person, confidence, independence.
And then you got to get cheddar cheese. What other kind of cheese do you grab?
Cheddar,
What's the other one?
mozzarella,
Oh, right. And which kind of sauce? The pizza sauce.
pizza sauce.
All right. I can't stress enough that this isn't a free ride. He's an actual employee who has actual expectations and is actually productive. I don't want people to think that this is a handout. This is actually just an alternative labor force.
We're a community, but we want everyone to be included in our society. Everybody deserves a chance to do whatever it is they want in life and to succeed. And David is a part of that.
It's just human nature to take anyone who's different and get them as far away from you as possible, which is so funny because when you actually bring more diversity into your place, it feels so much better. David hasn't ever done anything except improve everyone else's life around here. I can absolutely say that without any hesitation.
That's just one of the hundreds of stories you have on the website. Kind of taking it back a bit, right? We met earlier this week, and I talked about, I have a lot of friends in the recruiting industry. My wife is a recruiter, so AKA my out of work boss, right? So I hear about these stories a lot where they just can't do anything, especially in the staffing environment, but also if they're a recruiter for a corporation as well,
Sure.
right?
That's right.
And I've spoken to thousands of recruiters and whatnot, with my expertise being the applicant tracking and the LMS, like the Auzmor hire coming out, shameless plug. But how often do you see the sad negative side of that, where it's the individuals who are not given a chance, like David was in the video?
Yep.
I imagine it's
every day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
too
every
often.
day. It is, and indeed that's what keeps me in it. There's a pressure to act because, to be quite honest with you, Sean, no matter how successful we are with this movement, inescapably, it's going to come too late for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we have in this nation tens of thousands of individuals. In the case of returning citizens, which is what we like to call people coming out of prison, reentering society, in their case, we have tens of thousands who are languishing without a job. They've tried to make the hard decisions to turn their lives around. They've turned away from the past criminal behaviors that landed them behind bars, and they're changed. Yep. And yet, these individuals are having door after door slammed in their face. And eventually, they withdraw from the workforce, dragging their past like a ball and chain. And that to me is a tragedy. When I was a kid, I read a poem one time by Oliver Wendell Holmes, and a line from it never escaped me. And that line was, "Alas for those who never sing, but die with all their music in them." And these are individuals who will die with all their music in them. And to be quite honest with you, it's our fault because we maintain that a national principle is that the prison experience is designed to rehabilitate, to change people, to move them away from their criminal behavior and prepare them for reentering into society. That's what we say, but it's not what we do.
Yeah. Unfortunately. And, there's some things that some states have been trying out, obviously, with the ban the box.
Sure.
Which essentially says you can't put, have a question on an application, like, have you been convicted of a felony?
Certainly.
If so, explain whatever it may be. Have you seen that be effective at all, or, likes, dislikes?
I think the results are mixed. I guess I would say at the outset, I have tremendous respect for anybody who's in this arena fighting it out because they're doing it for the right reasons. They have good hearts, and they believe that people who have blown it in their lives need our support, need our forgiveness when they try to turn around and come back in. So absolutely nothing negative to say about that. From a strategic perspective, I diverge from that view. And the reason is this. I think that employers who are absolutely committed to the idea of not hiring someone with criminal conviction, they will find a way to not do that. So like you alluded to, what we do with Ban the Box is we remove that question from the application, which then leaves the employer in the dark about whether or not there has been an offense. And then, presumably, the individual, if they like them, if they're intrigued, they'll invite them in for an interview. And the hope is, of course, that they'll develop a relationship and an understanding of that individual, grow to like them potentially, before that revelation comes to light.
Yeah.
Okay, and I can see the appeal of that approach, and indeed it may in some cases work. But with many employers, if they have an unwritten policy against hiring those individuals, it's inevitable. They're going to reach that point, and then they're going to say, hey, it was great dragging you through these knotholes for 3 interviews, but the answer is no.
Right.
And of course, anybody who's been engaged in sales, learns early on that if you're engaging with a prospect, if the answer is no, show some emotional maturity and let's get to know. because we're all busy.
Right.
And that way you can shake the dust off your feet, move on to the next prospect, and there is always a next prospect. So in a way, I wonder if this is potentially counterproductive insofar as it wastes the time of the individual job seeker and also the employer. You know, I think that what's wanting is we need to make sure that the employers are willing to consider these overlooked candidates, not because they're suckered into it or not because they're compelled to it via regulation, but because they want to. And the way we're going to make them want to is by doing, frankly, what we're doing with America's Job Honors.
Exactly.
Yeah, we are making a solid business and moral case for hiring these individuals. We want the employer to hire them because they know that they might be the best employee they have.
Right.
And again, we see that individuals who have struggled, individuals who have overcome patterns of behavior in their lives or overcome the challenges of disability, they make not only adequate employees, but they make exemplary employees because frequently they demonstrate a remarkable work ethic because they've suffered and they know the value of a job for their lives. Whereas someone whose life, frankly, has been pretty smooth and unchallenging, very often they tend to develop a sense of entitlement, and you often hear employers complain about entitlement. You very rarely hear an employer complain about entitlement for somebody who's been through hell in their lives.
Yeah, honestly, and you know, watching some of those videos, you can definitely tell that, and that's what I think is so unique about what you're doing, because you know, I've worked with federal state contractors, spoken to thousands of leaders and recruiters, right, which is most likely a fraction of what you've spoken to, but even I've heard, you know, like the whole, the government side, the regulation, the compliance side. You know, you got your Executive Order 1124-6, VEVRA, Section 503, WOTC.
Right.
Okay, you know, for the compliance side of things, but your focus is, no, the person, the actual work ethic, and giving them a shot, because some of these can be superstars.
Precisely.
You know, at a minimum.
Absolutely, the retention.
Exactly. And my question to you is, you know, as we near the end of 2019, everyone talks about low unemployment rates. So does that show that people are actually hiring these folks, or is there, you know,
I think that,
are they counted in that? Or?
Sure, you know, it's a good question. I think that to a degree it certainly prevails to our advantage because a lot of employers have already shifted their pre-screen requirements. In fact, you occasionally hear of companies that have very quietly dropped their requirement that the individual successfully pass a marijuana pre-screen. You know what I mean?
Right.
And obviously they don't send out press releases when they make those decisions.
No one's hiring drivers or something like
precisely,
that.
Precisely.
Yeah, no,
but where they,
absolutely.
you know, in certain settings, production work, et cetera, they've quietly dropped that requirement because it's a tip of the hat to the reality that either those positions go unfilled forever, or they readjust their sites. And obviously, for people doing what I do, advocating for this untapped workforce, the low unemployment rate is frankly a benefit. If we had candidates with pristine backgrounds climbing in the windows, it would be very difficult to compel an employer to consider someone with criminal convictions. Right. And who can blame them? You know, I've been a hiring manager for much of my life. I have hired and fired hundreds. And I firmly believe in what I call the hiring manager's axiom, that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. You know, it's true whether we like it or not. And so therefore, you know, a person who has had difficulties and convictions in their lives, the onus is on them to prove to that employer that they have changed.
Right.
And if that applicant is not able to articulate in a compelling fashion the fact that they have changed, that employer has every right to pass on that candidate. Because, and I've interviewed those people where they will tell their story. Well, I got an OWI here, then public intox, and then my second OWI came here, and then another couple of public intoxes, and I'm listening thinking, okay, I like you, but please, let's get to a punchline. Tell me when you stopped drinking and why.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because absent.
Okay, so let's let's build the timeline here.
Exactly.
How recent
and let's have this lead somewhere where I know that there is a transition point in your life and an inflection point there. And if there is no inflection point, then obviously I'm not an idiot. I'm left to assume, okay, OWI number 5 is coming, isn't it? You know, and that's just common sense. So the onus is definitely on the employee when they're the applicant to make sure that they own their past, that they describe the transformation point or points after which their life was never the same, and that they present some vision of the future. And it's also important then that a third party can essentially attest that those things are true, whether it's someone in the prison system who saw them day in, day out during an apprenticeship program. But those are tells, and they are, you know, they're at their core subjective, but this is compelling evidence. But the only way an employer is going to hear those things is if they take the time to perform that individualized assessment. You know, in other words, rather than just blanket exile of everybody that's got the offense, you're going to have to look at them, invite them in, and have that conversation. And I think for most employers, it will be very evident whether this is an authentic, sincere individual. And if they are, man, quite possibly, it could be one of the best employers you ever had for the reasons that we discussed. And, you know, is there a little bit of additional risk? I would have to say yes, there is. But with risk should come reward. And the reward here is a very committed employee who's probably going to elevate the morale of the people around them, because they'll see, hey, I guess this is what it looks like when a person is really thankful for their job.
Yeah, seriously, yeah, right? And we'll work hard in turn, right? Engagement, hey, giving them a shot, I mean, that's the biggest engagement, you know, of an employee you could possibly have, right?
That's exactly right.
And this, so I want to go to the second video. This is a great time
Certainly.
to do it. Mr. Stephen Shuri of Ottumwa, Iowa.
Absolutely.
This is one of my favorite on your website.
Excellent.
I'm originally from Ottumwa, Iowa. I was born here, and the marriage between my mom and dad was pretty rough. My dad was pretty abusive towards all of us. My mom and dad ended up splitting up, got a divorce. Growing up, I kind of felt like I wasn't good enough, I guess. I started drinking pretty early, and then when I was in high school, got to smoking marijuana and led to meth. I was fighting mixed martial arts. I really enjoyed the competition, and plus, back then I wanted the image of a badass, and what better way to do it. Ended up leading to steroids later, and steroids is pretty much what helped my life fall apart. It turned me into an animal. It took me 5 years of being in prison and still had 5 more to do. That's when, you know, everything just changed.
We look at this as a training program that changes lives. That, you know, there's something in Steve I could see that I just knew that he could turn around and he could be such a good, productive person because he had that polite side to him. We worked and got him into this apprenticeship program and kind of forced him into it. Once he was in it, Steve was all in.
You know, when you finally give up and you're like, okay, this has got to change, and you know, the guy upstairs and me is the only two that can do it. So I was finally free, you know.
This program's about training individuals of what they want to do in their lifetime. Because if they're doing something they like to do, they're going to be successful doing it.
And he said, when you can weld 2 cans together, come talk to me. And I went and I rounded up 2 pop cans, and
everybody knows how thin those are. And he TIG welded those 2 aluminum pop cans together for me without a hole. Highly talented individual.
It was pretty neat to see the excitement in his face.
One of the prize treasures and trophies I have today sit in my office of 2 aluminum pop cans. He finished his program and became a journeyman in his field.
I transferred to Newton, so Tim contacted Brett Reyes that worked for Iowa Workforce Development in Newton Corrections.
He took advantage of every single service that I could possibly offer. I mean, mock interviews, helped him with the resume, filling out applications. We set up a phone interview. He was able to talk to his boss now. I think they were really impressed with him completing his welding apprenticeship. These programs are 4 to 5 years long, and if you're not passionate about it, you're really not going to complete it, let alone do it for the rest of your life. He got a job 3 weeks before he got out, and that's huge.
He was so thankful that we were giving him a chance. It makes a big difference when you go in for a job interview, how you present yourself. And he's just one of those special people that has that great personality. He said that it was just like he was home, that they welcomed him with open arms. Makes you feel good in your heart that your team is doing that.
He's a perfect example of what an offender can do while incarcerated to be successful. I talked with his people that he works with, and he'll hold the door open for them and thank them every day. And that makes me very proud, kind of like a proud father.
Winter gave me an opportunity, and I don't ever want to jeopardize that opportunity. Very grateful.
I would encourage the employer to really look in, what did the offender do while they were incarcerated? What did they do to become successful? Look at those people. They already have made their mind up. While incarcerated, they wanted to change.
There's a lot of talent in prison. There are people in there that want to get out and do right. They'll start at the bottom and work their way up.
Having an employer give somebody a second chance and never thought they were ever going to be able to get one ever again, they are grateful.
I just think everyone can change.
I mean, it's an amazing thing, because when you're in there, you think it's the end, and it's a new beginning.
So Stephen's story is an amazing one, but it's important to remember, he overcame incredible obstacles, but there are some individuals who, stole a pack of gum when they were 14 and they're still, oh, that was a felony. You're labeled, they're out in the workforce trying to get jobs like 25 and whatnot. I've heard a ton of these stories. So it's a wide spectrum.
It is.
Of whether or not,
It is, and frankly, I think this can be something that challenges the worldview of some individuals who are rather entrenched and dogmatic about the way they view the world. And indeed, it was for me. I got to be quite honest with you. If I were to go back a few years, I would have characterized my attitude towards struggling job seekers as pretty dismissive. My approach was kind of the hardcore businessman's approach. I thought, hey, man, had a lousy work ethic, you reap what you sow. I got nothing for you. Wasn't a bed of roses for me, but you fight, you work hard, you try to build a life, and you do what you have to do to take care of yourself and your family. And so, frankly, there's a little bit of sanctimony, a little bit of superiority in my attitude. The thing that challenged that was meeting them. It was sitting across the desk from a human being and hearing their story. And often the story that I heard caused me to conclude, holy smoke, the hand of cards that this person has been dealt is atrocious. We've all taken some hits in life, but pain and opportunity are not equally distributed in this world. Some people have gotten far more than their fair share. And you hear those stories, and I would have to ask myself after the interview, man, had I been dealt that same hand of cards, could I have played them any better?
Yeah.
And frequently I had to be honest with myself, no, I couldn't have.
I thought the same thing when I was watching some of these videos. Where I'm like,
it's like, good Lord, how do you get past that, man?
How would I overcome that? I'm like, oh, let's see. Well, good on you, because I don't think I could have done it.
That's spot on. And I think that your reference to the fact that some people get in with a rather minor offense, I too have seen that time and again. And often the very first offense might be something that's pretty much victimless. Let's say a person was caught selling a bag of weed, 12 years ago. And so that introduces them to the system. And what a lot of people don't understand is once you're in, it's tough to escape the gravitational pull of the criminal justice system. In fact, there are currently programs going around the state and around the nation called a Reentry Simulation. And what they do is they have people like you or I go in, we adopt the profile, the identity of someone who's in prison, and then we're released, and we have to go through this checklist of all the flaming hoops through which they must jump. And in the corner is a jail. And a lot of people wind up in that jail because it is tough for a person of means to satisfy all these requirements, to say nothing of someone who has no support structure. So once you're in, it's tough. So let's say you get one of those offenses in the early stage, you come out, you blow some requirement of your probation, boom, you're back in. Very quickly you become radioactive and unemployable. You can't find housing because frequently your background is like, so you become this disenfranchised. You know, I sometimes think of, this will date me, the island of misfit toys. From Santa Claus is coming to town.
Yes,
you know,
I'm right there with
right
you.
with me, good.
Yeah.
And so at any rate, you know, you get relegated to this category of not attached to labor force. And that kind of brings us back to your reference to the unemployment rate. And is that in fact an accurate reflection of jobless Americans? It is not. It is only a small subset of jobless Americans. A lot of people have the misconception that the unemployment rate is calculated by the number of people who are drawing unemployment. Not so, because many people who become unemployed, they're not eligible for unemployment, or people who have exhausted their unemployment benefits yet remain jobless are still out there without a job. So the fact of the matter is only a small percentage of non-working Americans are reflected in the category. And they do these monthly polls, and I won't get too abstract on this, but every month they call several hundred individuals and they ask a series of diagnostic questions. One of them is, do you have a job? And another one is, if not, are you actively seeking employment? Well, actively seeking means within the last 4 weeks. Well, if this is an individual who got out of prison 4 years ago, has had 500 doors slammed in their face, finally they see the writing on the wall, they give up, they withdraw. They would love a job, but they're no longer actively seeking. They're not even counted among the unemployed. So we have thousands of individuals in this state and in every state.
Last 4 weeks?
Last 4 weeks. And that has to be, that can't be, oh, I skimmed the classifieds last week. Nope, you don't count. It has to be, I sent in an application for this company, I sat in for an interview. So if you don't satisfy that criteria, then you are not seeking employment, therefore you are not unemployed. You are into a new category called not attached to labor force. Now, interestingly enough, the number of employed Americans, and I hope my numbers are right here. I'll send you some stats and graphs. But
if his mouth moves one way and different numbers come out, you know it was edited.
With a slightly different sound coming out. But about 110 million Americans who are currently in the workforce, and the number of jobless Americans, adults who are unemployed, yet not actively seeking employment, is something on the order of 95 million Americans. And some people estimate that within 20 years or so, the number of non-working adult Americans will exceed the number of working Americans. Obviously not a recipe for sustainability. So we need to go after that group. We need to stop pretending that the officially unemployed are our only potential source of candidates. We need to go after some of those who have given up in despair. The 70 million Americans who've been criminally involved, which is about the same number of Americans who have 4-year college degrees. The unemployment rate in that group, sky high. We need to bring some of those back in. The 55 million adult Americans with disabilities. Again, unemployment rates, you hear various figures, but at least 3 times that of non-disabled people. A lot of them can be drawn into the workforce, so it's time that philosophically our employers change their shift and recognize we have these massive untapped workforces in the United States, and as a competitive advantage for talent attraction, we need to start going after these people. And it will be transformative on so many levels. First of all, and most importantly in my view, it will transform the lives of those individuals who are dying with all their music in them. They'll be brought into society where they can make a contribution, and we will have the advantage of their tax dollars, their purchasing power. We will have the advantage of the labor that they're bringing to employers, their commitment, their high work ethic, the fact that they tend to have outstanding retention. So across the board, we'll save money on the public supports that currently they're drawing. So it's going to be transformative to our workforce, transformative to our economy if we can successfully begin going after these people. And also, the employers will reap the benefit of an appreciative public, because increasingly you can't survey millennials and young consumers without seeing they want to do business with companies that demonstrate a social conscience. So if you're in an industry, particularly one that's undergoing commoditization and it's difficult to separate yourself from the competition, I have the way for you. Seize that high moral ground and be seen as the employer that wants their workforce to reflect the community. Be seen as that employer that is willing to give people a chance that will transform their lives. And people will leave their current providers and they'll come and do business with you because they want to work with somebody with a heart, somebody who likes to change the world.
Right, and for a positive manner. And at the same time, you know, if they can do the job, if they have the skills necessary to complete the job, they, you know, from the, you know, criminal justice system have, I mean, shown reformation, right? And the ability to do all these, to do the tasks you need done, you're not losing anything. You're not losing anything to hire these people.
That's the huge irony.
You know, it's not like, well, I did a great thing and that position's going to suffer.
Right.
No, I mean, if you go to this, your website, it's incredible. It's like all of their stories are, well, no, and then they exceeded all expectations.
Sure.
Multiple times it says things like, the best employee I have.
That's
now,
exactly right. We hear that a lot.
So, and I think there's so many societal norms and things like that where it's like we have that negative tag.
Right.
Oh, criminal.
Sure.
They stole a pack of gum when they're 14, man.
Right.
Or disabled. Well, they're smarter than half the people in the darn office to begin with.
That's exactly
right. So, we put these terms on individuals, and I'm completely right there with you.
Well, and you're spot on, and I just have to interject. It's you're absolutely right. Those stories, when it works great, and obviously, the fact is sometimes it does not work. And but I think that these are risks that can be managed. Employers who are approaching this in a savvy way can remove significant layers of risk. And so we're not saying it's risk-free. We're not saying people haven't blown it. But I think that one of the disservices that has been done for people who advocate, as I do, for these candidates is to push people out there who are not workforce ready. And to be honest, some people who are in the community, the provider community, doing the human services, sometimes traditionally they have not had a keen understanding of the realities of business requirements. Therefore, they may have been inclined to foist candidates onto an employer who wants to do the right thing, and that employee was not ready. Well, of course, 9 million people are going to hear about that failure.
Right.
You know what I mean? So to a degree, you poison that well. And I think that at least now there's individuals who are in this arena are taking note and recognizing, look, we have to be honest about the fact that not everyone changes. Not everyone who comes out of prison should get a job because they've demonstrated zero evidence of a changed life. And in fact, when I talk to people like Stephen Shuri, and I asked him this question, and I've asked it hundreds of times of others, okay, Stephen, you were in prison. You were surrounded by other guys who were in for a variety of offenses. Clearly, you were laser focused on changing your life, getting back out, doing the right thing. Of all the people around you in that prison, how many were like you versus the ones who were just hanging out, shooting the breeze in the prison yard, lifting weights? And invariably, the answer I get from these individuals is maybe 3 or 4 out of 10. And that's something that won't necessarily win me any awards for people who are working with those candidates. I wish it was more flowery, but I call it as I see it. So the fact is, so maybe 30 or 40% of the people coming out of prison have they've repented. They've changed. They've left their old life behind. They're picking up the skills required. Those are the ones for whom we advocate. We don't advocate for indiscriminately hiring people with red flags.
Right.
Don't pull up your van in front of the gates of the prison and just say hop in. No. But if you look for these tells and speak to somebody who knows that individual in a professional capacity and who can vouch for them, and if you get one of those gems, one of those 30 or 40%, man, you've got something. And also, I think the more that the people who are unchanged, see that, hey, it is possible to change your life. You can be forgiven and welcomed back into society. I think we'll see those numbers go up. A lot of the bitterness, a lot of the hardness right now arises from the fact that they have concluded that we'll never be accepted back. We have the scarlet letter for life. Might as well turn mean and embrace despair, you know?
It's kind of, and it's a cycle.
It's a cycle.
Right, because then when they come to us and we see that, we think, well, they'll never have a shot. They'll never be able to be reformed, right?
Exactly, and they can read that on you like a book.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it's a matter of simply changing the narrative.
It is
really,
changing
which is
the
what
narrative.
you're doing perfectly there with the what you're doing.
I appreciate that.
Um,
And, you know, in point of fact, I've seen it at the individual level too. I was in a prison in eastern Iowa a few weeks ago, and they had there were a number of representatives from local community colleges and some employers, and the idea was they would bring in a handful of inmates, and we could just kind of mix it up, have some conversations. There was one gentleman seated there who was just totally engrossed in some paper he was reading, and I felt for the guy. So I went over and I started a conversation with him. And it was obvious he didn't think that he had a future. You know, he was just doing his time. And I began asking him, well, what were your hopes? What were your dreams before you came in? What are you doing now to try to turn your life around? And there was a few things he shared with me that led me to believe that an opportunity that was right there in that room would have been made to order. It was actually driving a cement truck, of all things. They had...
which is a job in need.
Precisely. And there was a community college in there that does the training for it. There was employers in desperate need of workers. So the next thing you know, I made an introduction. We had a three-way conversation go on between him, the college teaching the class, and the employer in need of people. And it was interesting. And I just kind of was an auditor at that point. But at one point in that conversation, the guy suddenly, the prisoner, he stopped talking. And there was a wave of emotion over his face. And out of the blue, he began crying. And nobody said a word. You know, figured give him time to compose himself. But it was painfully obvious to me what was going on there. The guy had been spoken some hope. He had been shown some love. He had been shown some understanding, and it completely overwhelmed him. This is something he may not have gotten much of in his entire life, to say nothing about his time in prison. It transforms a person's life when you show them that you believe in them, you care about them, you're willing to work with them and give them an opportunity. All the punishment in the world can't do what that can do. That can penetrate a person's heart and change it forever.
Yeah, and when's the last time you hired someone who cried because they're given the opportunity? We talk to all these folks, especially in the skilled trades. I've heard of a lot of my friends and everything say, well, I just need a warm body.
Yeah.
Well, how many of those guys and gals are you hiring that are going, thank you so much for the opportunity, I'm going to work my butt off?
Absolutely.
Because given the chance.
Yeah, you get a warm heart with that warm body.
Exactly. Kind of shifting focus a little to the actual employer. With staffing, obviously, they're kind of a middleman between candidates and the company. They're given a set of criteria. They really can't go outside that a lot of the times.
Sure.
My friends, wife, the different companies I've worked with that are staffing companies have all said, we can't do anything about it.
Right.
But as an internal recruiter, right, from a corporate setting,
Sure.
what can he or she do to say, nope, don't just throw this application out the door. Sit with this individual, and meet with them in person, because a lot of these managers, these hiring managers, they're also managers. They have a lot going on.
Yeah.
So that's what they rely on the recruiter to cut out a lot of, what's not qualified.
Sure.
But can they campaign for the individuals? What have you seen be successful being that middle
it's
man
a very
or woman?
good question. And one of the things, and this is kind of self-serving, but I would say, if they need to get the buy-in of their senior managers before they can go down this road, show them some of our videos. Find a competitor who's in the same space, who's hiring from this untapped workforce with great results, and share those with the team. You know, maybe have it be a lunch and learn. Give me a call. I'll come out and talk to them anytime, any place, and basically make the case of, look, if you are completely disregarding these 70 million Americans, same number of people with 4-year degrees, then you're doing so to your own peril, because a lot of your more savvy competitors have gotten past that, and they're finding great talent. So the time is now to make that shift. But you're right on the money in that it often takes somebody who gets it, somebody who, you know, let's face it, these rules usually came down from the ivory tower in the corporation decades ago, and no one has ever questioned it. We've always done it that way, and it served us just fine. You know, it's a whole new ball game. Those rules came down when the unemployment rates were at 3 times their current levels. You know, the best battle plans.
Back then, right?
Precisely. The best laid battle plans, as they say, don't survive the first engagement with the enemy. If you're unwilling to change your approach based upon current market conditions, then you're a dinosaur. So it's time that you reassess. And so I would encourage those individuals who see the light to make that case to their managers. If it will help them to make their case by sharing these videos or bringing in me or someone else, that would be great as well. And then short of that, I would say give it a shot. You know, try one. You don't have to open the floodgates, but if you got one person you're feeling really good about, bring them on board. I have found that with a lot of companies, that's precisely where it begins. They bring someone in, and all of this anticipated fear and backlash doesn't occur. And so, well, that was anticlimactic. Great worker. Let's go back to the well and get another one.
Yeah.
You know, so you show some guts, I guess, is what I'm saying. And leaders, maybe do something crazy. Show some leadership. You know, a little bit of moral leadership, and see if you can make it happen. Transform your company.
Yeah, and I just want to point out one thing. This is what's so amazing, just speaking with you, because not once did you ever mention anything. Well, beside the fact that it's the law, or you know, work opportunity tax credits, you can get some kickback. No, do it because you can find a valued employee that does the work just as well, if not a lot of the times better than everyone else. You know,
Very true. I appreciate you noting that.
Really cool. And
the others are just sweeteners.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. And one thing, you know, Kyle won't tell our viewers here, but when he says he'll come out or help out, jump on the phone, whatever, a lot of folks might be thinking, well, how much will that cost me? And I just want to have, you know, I want to let everyone know, Kyle, you actually don't even take a paycheck.
No.
Now, mind you, this gentleman right here to my left has been the founder of other companies. He has been a manager. He has been a hiring manager. You know, recruiting. He let all that go to work at this nonprofit that you're not even taking a paycheck from to better the lives of others. You know, I'd encourage, I know I'm going to go right after this video, but you can not only make individual donations here to America's Job Honor Awards, but you can be a company sponsoring this incredible, you know, organization, and that in and of itself is not only going to change lives of others, but it's going to put you in the same realm that he was talking about with the corporations and everything that show the younger generations like, hey, this is not just about making money. It's also about making the world a better place, right?
Amen.
So I want to encourage anybody who's a leader at a company or an individual donor, go to America's Job Honor Awards. I keep wanting to call it Iowa's Job Honor Awards because I kept reading all the articles. And go to their website and donate. And if your company consider partnering and sponsoring this incredible endeavor he's going through. Side note, sorry, I knew you weren't going to say anything, so I wanted to say it for you.
Kind of you, Sean. I really appreciate that. And, you know, we've got a lot of unmet demand. A lot of other states have seen what we're doing here, and they say, please, you got to come to our state. And we can't. We're kind of at a, you know, it's a one-man initiative right now. And so, of course, I'm required to wear a lot of hats. And my business development director hat can only go on for a few minutes a week. You know
Right.
what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so that has been a challenge. But you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we're endeavoring to do, those companies who opt to stand with us and help us change the world are very deserving of getting the full benefit of that association. So we feature their logos in the opening credits of our videos. So as I say to these employers, this is an opportunity to develop a connection with your prospects at the level of the heart in a way that's nearly impossible to achieve with conventional marketing. And so, yeah, anyone who's interested in a one-timer, visit our website. There's a Support Us button. If you're a company and want to consider a relationship, like being a sponsor of one of our award ceremonies, we have a sponsorship portfolio talking about the various gradations of sponsorship. But I appreciate that. You know, my strategy from the start has always been, you know, I feel personally called to do this. I feel like it's an opportunity to make the world a better and a more welcoming place for my struggling brothers and sisters, and I'm going to do just that. And so I've always given everything away. You know, I got a phone call from an organization last week that said, "Yeah, we play your videos all across Minnesota. They're making a huge impact."
Oh, yeah?
I think that's great. And perhaps I was a bit naive because I always thought, well, if I give everything away, the money will just naturally start piling up at my door.
Not yet.
Not yet. So I'm beginning to focus more on the ask.
Right.
You know? So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And when I saw that, I was kind of blown away. But you know, kind of rerouting as well, and speaking a bit more on this area. Some other come from behind stories that you've seen changes in leaders. Have you seen any of those types of stories where the leader, so I've talked to a lot of folks.
Sure.
I've had the conversations, honestly, with federal contractors, with CEOs, saying, if they have a tattoo, I don't want them. They're trash.
Wow.
If they show up at the door and they have a tattoo, well, yeah, you know, you could say, hey, no visible tattoos, it's a dress code policy.
Sure.
It's like, no, I just don't like people with tattoos. It's
Man.
like, oh, what the heck? And then, you know, I actually talked to that same guy about a year or two later, and he had made some changes because they were a major mechanical contractor, needed
people.
The people with the experience, and I'll be darned. You mean to tell me a tattoo on somebody's body doesn't change a thing about their mind or heart or anything? So that was one of the coolest stories I've heard. Honestly, one of the only ones that comes to mind now. But what's your go-to top when you think of leadership changes?
One that really I found gratifying and moving occurred with one of our recent honorees, Frontier Co-op, based out of a little town called Norway, Iowa, which is a few miles west of Cedar Rapids. But they told me that they had attended an event at Anamosa Prison. It was an employer event. I was a speaker there, and I shared a couple of our honoree videos, and I had invited a former honoree to speak, and they were in the audience. And they later explained to me that after having seen these videos and being deeply moved by them, that on their way out to the car, they had a conversation in which they concluded, we need to be a part of one of these stories. And sure enough, they proactively began going down that road. How can we find sources of these candidates, people who are returning to society from prison, and recruit them and get them into the organization? And they are a company with a long history of social activism, social conscience, and they did what they said they were going to do. And they ultimately began hiring. They hired an individual by the name of Michael Willoughby from Iowa, who served several years in prison, about 10 years. And Michael Willoughby, it turns out, was one of our honorees in 2018.
Oh, wow.
So here we went to that company, and I had the pleasure of, in the context of entering Michael Willoughby and his colleagues to learn his story, I had the pleasure of asking their HR department, you know, what impelled you to go down this road? And then to sit there at the desk and have them say, well, we saw some of your videos, and it really deeply inspired us. it was a huge affirmation for me, because I realized, okay, this is a direct loop link demonstrating that what we're doing is resulting in changed lives. And something like that will keep wind in your sails for a long time.
Yeah.
And since that time, they have even taken it steps further, developing ways of transporting individuals on work release in vans to their place of business. They're really turning out to be thought leaders in this arena. And Tony Bedard, the CEO of Frontier Co-op, he speaks very compellingly on this issue, and he's one of those, like me, who believes that talk is cheap. You are what you do, not what you say you will do. And so they're doing it. And that company, they're building a world-class workforce while changing lives. And they're going to be an example of a leader that we can point to and look to in the years ahead.
That's awesome. And, you know, once again, I want to point out just a quick snippet of what you just said. We need to be a part of one of these stories, not we need to be a part of this so we look good too to the public, or so we get a, I'm telling you, if you don't, you know, if you do one thing, just go to the website, view some of these stories that he's speaking about, because it's not a compliance thing. It's not, you know, oh, how do we look better to the public, you know, get our two cents of, you know, hey, yeah, we're good too. Okay, we're done with that. Moving on. These stories really change lives, and you know, you can train some of these individuals as well, and they develop a lot of the times quicker, because they're so involved and engaged in like making sure they do a great job.
That's right.
Because they've been given an opportunity. Right.
That's right. And one thing I'll add that's just so spot on about what you're saying there is, you know, the fact of the matter is, companies that make it their focus just to do the right thing, to hire these great employees, they will reap all of those additional benefits, but they will come organically as a natural consequence. You know, it's almost a seek ye first to do the right thing, then all these things will be added unto you, you know, and those things are added. The respect, the appreciation of the consumers, you know, your company will be looked upon as a thought leader and as an engaged, for good, socially conscious company, a company doing well by doing good.
Because they are.
Doing the right thing. That's exactly right.
Because
they are. And not because they talk about
Yeah.
it, and not because they spend 20 grand on a social media campaign to try to refine their image. And this is what I've spoken in every prison in Iowa.
Really?
And
wow.
yes, I have.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I love to. At first, it was a little bit unnerving.
Yeah.
You know, sitting in a gymnasium surrounded by 350 inmates.
Right.
At picnic tables. You know. Well, I guess I'm on now.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, one of the things I share with them is I always tell them, you know, and I think sometimes I say things that not everyone does. I don't go in there and say, hey, we really need to work on those resumes. You know, or you really need to hone your interview skills. No. What I start with is step one, and I actually put it on the projected on the PowerPoint. Step one, you got to change. You're here for a reason, and you know, if unless and until you've changed, unless and until you abandon those behaviors that landed you here behind bars, you're just going to go out and blow it again, cost everybody a lot of time and money. So step one is change. Step two is convince the hiring manager that you have changed. So step one is necessary but not sufficient. You got to be able to articulate that, and that's when I talk to them about developing their stories, etc. But I want to be clear with those guys because I want to tell them the truth, and the truth is, you know, you can't take those bad behaviors with you and have a changed life. You know, the price of freedom is discipline, whether we like it or not. I don't like it, but it happens to apply to me. You know, I find that when I do the right thing, my life goes well. When I don't, I wind up in trouble, you know. And so that's they can't escape those laws of nature. And so I think, once again, this all boils down to just following those baby steps, doing the right thing. And then next thing you know, wow, huge transformations, major benefits to the company.
Yeah. And I kind of want to end off with the question we ask everyone here on the video podcast or podcast, however you're listening, watching this, whatever it may be. What is, if the viewers of our Culture Couch today get one thing out of our discussion, what would you like that to be?
people change. And I think it's very easy to lose sight of that. And I think it's, you know, what we're proposing here is something that should appeal equally, completely across the political spectrum. But unfortunately, and I think somewhat perversely, these issues have become politicized, where people believe that it's the purview of one side of the aisle to be in favor of second chances and the other side of the aisle to be in favor of perpetual punishment. You know, then we all need to be in favor of helping our fellow Americans, our brothers and sisters, turn it around. And should there be punishment for crimes? You bet your life. A price must be paid. But the fact is, after the legal sentence has been completed, do we then have a right as a society to add an informal extra sentence and say, look, you did your time, you did well, appreciate all that, but now we're going to sentence you and your family to a lifetime of unemployment and poverty and no place to live. I mean, there's no reform in that equation. What that is permanent disenfranchisement. And of course, you know, I've walked through neighborhoods where 3 out of every 4 black kids will be dead or in prison by age 18. You know, people just need to let that soak in. Is that the America we want to live in? You know, do we rejoice in seeing people get their just desserts? You know, I don't know about you. I did not pick my parents, and I did not pick my zip code. I was thrust into existence, just like the rest of you. So if I've got a brother who's been thrust into that existence and has been dealt that hand of cards, he's not my enemy. I will be his advocate. I will be his friend, because, man, I want to help him live a good life, a happy life, a life filled with joy that has the same opportunities I've had, and I don't want him to die with all his music in them. Now, if this does not surpass politics, then nothing does. So I think those of us who may have preconceptions about our own political doctrine, you know, and thinking that somehow it means that we should be opposed to this, think again. You know, I repented of my hard-heartedness. I realized I was on the wrong side of this issue, and I'll tell you what, it's nice to be able to change the world, but you can't change the world unless you're willing to consider the fact that maybe you've been wrong about something your entire life, and that can be a liberating thing.
And thank you so much. So, once again, Sean O'Brien here with Auzmor and the Culture Couch. Thank you so much, Mr. Kyle Horn. You know, it's been an honor to meet you and to hear about the work you do. Once again, make sure you go to the website, America's Job Honor Awards.
Jobhonor.org.
Jobhonor.org. I'm sitting here going, I didn't write this down.
Or they could Google it.
Yeah, jobhonor.org.